Okay, here we are.
Episode 1, season 1, the Inception, the pilot, the beginning. And here they were at the beginning. This is the deep end, an astrology podcast with Sarah Gordon and Sara Lhrar. The deep Sarahs came together to make something.
Yes, birthing a baby, birthing something alchemical together, something magical together, exploring ourselves through the lens of archetype, astrology, cosmology, mythology, all of it, personality,
Yeah.
psychology. Yeah. Yeah. So this is our passion. This is what we do every day. Sarah and I are full-time astrologers, and we both learned astrology, or we both came into contact with astrology like 26 or 27 years ago, like way back.
In parallel lives. We were having parallel lives for a very long time.
Yeah.
Until our common astrology godmother, Deborah Silverman, put us together in the same school as teachers. And so we met as co-workers and then as friends, and these conversations that we can't help but have when we're together. Yeah, how we meet in this place, you and I, that we have this very maybe different perspective, but we get to the same type of realms through different routes. And so we have these very deep conversations when we're together about astrology. Yeah, we don't do shallow. Although I do love a shallow moment. Hold up. For the apology of shallow, though.
It's okay to be shallow sometimes. So I am a double Gemini. You are a double Taurus.
Yeah.
And that's just remarkable, right? So we're both very shallow archetypes, actually, but I don't think limits us.
Right, but the babies of the zodiac,
The babies,
Aries, Gemini, and
we're a little
Taurus. The
silly,
babies,
we're a little indulgent, but we'll go for it.
the
So
spring babies.
we are putting this podcast out because it is really just a conversation that we can't help having, and we've already put out a few conversations. We've been putting them out there and getting a lot of great feedback. So we thought we would finally do this a little bit more formalized. So this is our inception point. This is our first episode, and today what we would like to do is explore the archetype of Virgo. Right? We never really have a concrete plan for what we're going to do when we get together. Both of us find something inspiring in the current zeitgeist and the current astrological milieu of what's happening in the cosmos, and we gather to combine our individual perspectives so that we can see what's created in the intersection. So today that is going to be Virgo, because we just entered Virgo season, right? About a week ago. What was it, about a week ago now?
What day are we? We're the 28th. So yeah, 5 days ago.
It was less than a week. It was 5 days.
Yeah. 5 days ago we entered Virgo season. What's interesting is that I always feel the season a little bit at a different moment, and really the new moon for me is very much an entrance into a sign. In the Jewish calendar, we've been in the Virgo season since our last new moon, which happened a few days before.
Even though that new moon was in Leo.
That new moon was actually in the last degrees of Leo, right?
Yes,
so it was at 28 Leo. So just after it entered Virgo. So yeah, that was the moment. It was the first night of Virgo.
It's so interesting because that night I had this crazy dream. It was an initiatory dream into the archetype. And I had this dream where I recognized I was shown this part of my narcissistic self-inflation pattern. And I was brought into this way that I'd been like making myself more than I am. in some, right, as Leo will, right, as our ego will. And then I was shown how I had been in this inflationary state because I didn't want to go down into a level of vulnerability and shame that I was not ready to process yet. And so in the dream, I was shown the inflation and I was like, oh my God, like I've been delusional. Holy crap. I felt a bit embarrassed. And then it brought me down into the feelings that were the reason why I had to have that compensation. And I sat there and I awoke inside this extremely uncomfortable soup of my own anxiety and my own shame. And I just lay there in bed and I didn't have anywhere to go with it except for just to breathe, right? And just to process it through my body. And that was the inception point of the season on that new moon night. And that is so the telling of what happens to us as we go from Leo to Virgo, right? Because it is this inflection point energetically where we go from being at the top of the
100%.
top to the bottom of the bottom. And we have to.
Virgo is a sign of humility. Virgo is a sign of humility, and Virgo and Leo is not the sign of humility. But maybe the transit between the inflation of Leo to the descendants into Virgo can be through shame. That moment is very like end of Leo. Shame might be actually that little cusp moment between Leo and Virgo, right? Because what happens when you take all the risks in Leo with your fire and you're showing yourself, somebody is going to hold a mirror and be like, you ain't shit. And that's the greatest fear for Leos.
That's it.
That's Leo's greatest fear. And so maybe it's that moment where there's like a descent into humility, which happens in Virgo. Now with Virgo, the trick is to not get stuck in that humility phase and to like come back for air, you know, because Virgos can get really wrapped up into shame.
It's true. Self-deprecation, self-annihilation, self-flagellation.
Not enoughness.
Yeah.
There might be too muchness in Leo and then not enoughness in Virgo, you know? And I find, you know, what's interesting is that I find that these two signs are particularly heavy to wear for women.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They're harder signs for women than they are for men. Virgo and Leo.
Virgo and Leo are harder for women than they are for men. Interesting. Interesting. What makes you say that?
You know, with Leo, because Leo really asks you to take space and to hone your voice and to be loud and to shine, like that this world is not is not built for that, right? Women are better seen than heard, for instance, you know, like children. And so taking your space for a woman can be really actually quite dangerous, you know. That could get you beaten and killed in some instances,
world, it
you know, and raped and hung and burned. And so this lives through our
biological memory.
Biological memory. So taking space for a woman is dangerous. And then the service, the servitude, and Virgo is really tricky for women too. Really tricky for women as well.
Well, it is, I mean, for traditional role structures, women have been seen more as the domestic slave kind of servitude to the family was their only responsibility or their only option. So there is this sort of martyrdom, sort of this violation, like, so I'm a slave to, I am bound by. And you know, it's funny, I feel like so many of these things are probably present for men as well, but just in different,
right?
Because these are parts of the archetype, right? The concept of binding, like there's a bind that happens in Virgo, and when you start to look at the mythology of Virgo and then and more of the esoteric secrets of what Virgo is, you start to understand what that the bind what that means metaphorically, what it means spiritually, and how that will express through the personalities. But one thing I did want to say though is I feel like in the Virgo archetype, this descent or this fall, which is also like it's within the mythology of Virgo, it's very clear. It's a fall with purpose. There is a reason for it. It's not just so you can sit there and be angry at yourself or self-deprecating. Like it's not there to make you shameful. It's not there to invoke you being bad or you being nothing. Rather, it's there with an incredible reason. And the reason is that in that 6th house place, in that Virgo place, we have now developed the personality. Ego is the critical climax of the personality egoic development, right? We're looking at a child that has developed its sense of will, its sense of safety, its sense of intellect and its language, its sense of family, tribe, and belonging. And now in Leo, it's all about, this is who I am, right? This is me. Show me to the world. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Take it. Do you like it? But in order for the child to develop to the point where he can be a social being on equal footing with others in Libra, there needs to be a coming down to the same level as other people. There needs to be an equalization, right? Because if you think about the sun, which rules Leo, when the sun is out in the sky, you can't see the stars. You can't see the fact that we are one of billions and trillions, right? So Leo doesn't know that it is one of billions and trillions. It just knows itself. And so there's this very natural deflation that is required on a psychological personality level so that we can actually have good relationships with each other. Like it's an absolutely healthy process. And humility is a healthy state of being. It means I can
100%.
see you because I'm not trying to make myself so much more than I am in order to impress you, right? Like in Leo, like the narcissistic aberration that can happen there is that there's a shame that happens or a wound that happens in the child somewhere, or there's a reward for something, and it becomes a narcissistic aberration within the personality. So what that means is the personality can develop these masks or these personas. I'm now the hero, or I'm now the best, I'm now the athlete, or I'm now the special one, or I'm now the academic, and there's something so amazing about me. And or alternatively, on the other side of that, there can be a deflationary narcissism as well. And it's really important to remember that narcissism can go both ways, right? Inflation or deflation. And in Virgo, the intention is to bring us all the way down and to cull all of those personality aberrations, like all of those ways that our little true self has gone awry or has had to compensate on top of something vulnerable or something inside that was afraid of being itself, because Leo is so insecure at its core, right? It doesn't have any clue whether people are going to like it. So it can just go a little bit too far in trying to get the approval that it really wants to have, right? It can create these little narcissistic loopings. And so the Virgo wants to shave all that down with great precision to bring the personality back down to what it actually is. No more.
Exactly. It's the double-edged sword of discernment with Virgo. And so that's why it's tricky. Also, that descent is tricky because when you're in Virgo, the awareness, that self-awareness that Leo lacks, all of a sudden you have a critical point of view that can discern this is useful and this is not useful. And so staying stuck in the not useful mode is always where the danger with being a Virgo can lie. What's not useful? What should be changed? What should be changed? Right? Because it's all about that discernment of what do I bring? What is useful for me? Am I useful? Virgo very much deals with the self being made of use, being a tool for the divine, right?
It
How to be.
It can be. It always wants to find something inside of it that's good. It's trying to be good at some level.
Yeah,
Should we talk a little bit about the mythology? Because I think that
absolutely. Yeah.
speaks to the mythology. So the classic mythology behind Virgo is the mythology of Astrea, or Dike, who was the goddess of moral order, fair judgment, and this kind of transcendental or transcendent universal idealism. So if you think about like if you just pull yourself out like into the universe and you look down at reality, you can imagine that everything is just geometrically perfect, right? That there is some kind of geometry that orders everything. And if you could just constellate according to that perfect form, right, then there would be sort of an intrinsic morality to that. Like if we were all in our perfect form, we wouldn't behave in ways that were aberrant or out of sorts. It would just be exactly what is, no more, no less, right? It would just be perfect. And if we were all perfect, we would be good, wouldn't we? We would be just loving. We would be loving. And it sort of speaks to that, the concept of Pisces as sort of this utopic spiritual ideal of unconditional love and sort of spiritual unity of all, like the perfection of all things. And Dike was this goddess who was, well, she was the daughter of Zeus. And in order to tell her story, you sort of have to contextualize it into the four eras of man's descent that the Greeks talk about. They talk about the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age as being these four stages in human evolution over like hundreds of thousands of years. And in the Gold Age, we were all one with God, and there was perfection on the earth, and everyone was in their perfect form because there was no separation, right? And you wanted something, it was there. Like there was no toil, labor, work, nothing. But as we descended into the different ages, we got farther and farther away from the gods. And as we came into the Iron Age, the final age, humans descended into a state of total depravity and separation from source or from the gods. And all the Olympian gods decided at this point that it was useless for them to hang out on Earth anymore because these human beings were violent, they were neglectful, they were rageful, egotistical, selfish. They had no interest in the gods anymore at all. They were only interested in their own vileness, their own smallness, pettiness, their own trauma, their own separate selves, right? They were so in their own animalistic kind of selfishness. And so the gods left and they all took off except for Dike, or Astrea. And she stayed because she had this feeling that somehow she could do something that would help these poor humans redeem themselves, that there was hope. There was hope for them. And she had this belief that there was this high spiritual ideal, then they could just get back to that. If they could just get back to that, they could remember the gods. They could remember what it's like to be good and holy and in this perfect form. And she stayed and stayed and stayed and watched and watched and watched. And she became so bitter. She became so jaded and bitter. And finally, in this bitter rage of like just disgusting humans, they're just vile, and look at all the horrible things they've done, and look at all the horrible, they're awful. And she rejects them and she leaves in this sort of woeful, disgust. And Zeus makes her a constellation, the constellation of Virgo in the sky. You can imagine she's always there watching. She's always there waiting for us to remember ourselves and our perfection. Yet she's up there and we're down here, and there's this descent and ascent, and that this process of coming down and going up, and how these two parts come together is very much a part of this archetype. Because how Pisces, I always say, it's how does God come into a body? Right? If you're in God, if you're one with God in Pisces, how does God descend and come into form? It comes into form through Virgo. And it's that rectification of the mortal and the immortal, and the way these two things intercept, that happens in this archetype. And there's also the Persephone myth as well, is also said to be Virgoan, with Demeter and Persephone. I don't know if we want to get into that one, but that one's interesting because it also speaks of descent, right? You have this innocence of Persephone in the field of the narcissus flowers, right? Narcissism. She's in this field of narcissus flowers, totally intoxicated with her own perfection, right? And that's the Leonin narcissism, right? In the state of perfection, perfectly innocent, perfectly beautiful, perfectly Pisces. And then she is ripped from the field down and taken into the underworld by Hades, where she is violated. Her perfection is violated. She's made base, or she's reduced to some kind of an underworld place. She's brought down, descent into what? Well, the underworld, which is, I suppose, the unconscious, subconscious realm, right? The part of us that's under the surface. It's not just this bright and shiny love light of the Leonin shine. It's everything that lies beneath, all the motivations, all the history, all the trauma, all the karma, everything that's under in the human realm, in the feminine. And from that place, her mother, Demeter, grieves her loss by wandering the countryside for a long time. And the whole world goes fallow into great drought, and everything starts to die because Demeter is in such grief at losing her daughter, the innocence of her daughter. And she doesn't know where her daughter's gone. She is blind. She cannot see what's happened. And eventually, I think it's Helios, the sun, I believe it's Helios, I might have that part of the myth wrong, who tells her what's happened, because no one's saying a thing, but Helios sees all, and reveals that Zeus and Hades have, conspired to take this girl and make her queen of the underworld. And so Demeter is able to get Hermes, who is the ruler of Virgo, to go down and she agrees, she makes a deal with Zeus, and Hermes goes into the underworld, as he's the only one who can, as the psychopomp, go down into the underworld and back up without restriction. And he goes down to retrieve Persephone and bring her back. But Persephone has eaten of the underworld. She has eaten pomegranate seeds. And once you eat of the underworld, once you go down into the unconscious, you're always forever changed. You can never reclaim your innocence. There is a part of you that will always remain in the dark. And she comes back up, but with the caveat that she will have to return on a regular cycle. So down and then up and down and up. So half the year she spends with her husband ruling the underworld, and then half the year she comes up with her mother. And when she's up with her mother, the lands replenish, and there's bounty, and there's fecundity, and there's abundance. And when she goes down, her mother's grief lays waste to the land and everything dies. And so the myth really speaks to that descent, that fact that we cannot stay in our innocence. We cannot stay in the pure childlikeness of our childhood. We just can't. We have to face the fact that life is hard. We have to face the fact that life is suffering. We have to face the reality of what life actually is in this planet. And it's not pretty, right? We all have base instincts. We all have needs and desires and parts of us that are not very pretty. And to go into that place where we're willing to, look at that in the face makes us more powerful. And then when we rise back up, we are more fertile, right? We're more abundant. We're able to grow things again. And so there's this natural cycle of down and up that happens in the archetype, either from decay, looking down and then redeeming the underworld and bringing it up to the universal utopic world, or Persephone and Demeter, where it sees the descent as being a part of nature, more of a cycle, and that there is a natural redemption, but then dissension, and that we just can't stop. Like, it's a constant, actually, to go down and come up.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated with the sacredness of taking care of the mundane. For me, there's like that, even in there's like this real, when we're talking about descent, about the body, about health, about work, about suffering, there's themes of Virgo that people are, maybe rejectful of, when you're talking about illness, about the body, there's a lot of like basic matter that happens there, that for me, I find there is incredible sacredness in the act of like rolling your sleeves and changing a baby's diaper. And so for me, that opposition with Pisces, sometimes I wonder, like, what is more sacred? to be on top of the mountain, lost in meditation with Pisces, or to be wiping a baby's shitty bum? And is that not the most sacred, the most humble moment, the most Virgo moment, where your hands literally have shit on them? You know? But isn't that the most sacred act of godliness, of selflessness? And so with Virgo, one of the things that I'm really invested in is making the mundane sacred. How can doing the dishes be a devotional? How can you show up to the dishes in practice? How can sweeping be energy work? You know, that's a thing that I always say about Virgo, is that witches didn't have brooms for flying. Witches have brooms for cleaning up, because it's a mess making those potions with the cats and the birds and the things. There's a lot of the sacred act of simplicity, everyday magic. And so to reach that, it's very humble. There's this meme going around the internet that is so Virgo that I adore. It says, everybody wants to do ayahuasca, nobody wants to do the dishes. You know? And so, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like these super high gurus that are like literally flying above the surface of the earth. And then a person like a social worker,
Yep.
who's helping grandmas. Like, who's doing sacred work?
You can sit there and talk about how spiritual and special you are, but really, like, are you getting out and helping people? What's your service? Like, what are you doing? And what are you
What are you
doing?
doing with your hands? What are you doing with, like, is your body of service to what? You know? And so it really brings the divine down to earth. And it's such a beautiful place. And so I wanted to talk about the Virgo month in the Jewish calendar, because it ties up really beautifully with that. First of all, you said pomegranate, and I had to write it down, you know, eating the pomegranate. Like, Virgo is the season of the pomegranate. The pomegranate in that area of the world is like in every myth that is like fall, right? And so it's also in like all the Jewish holidays, there's pomegranate as well there. So it's kind of like, you know, it's all blended.
This be
But
time for Sukkot in this season.
and right, I know, but so the holidays are next month. The holidays are in the month of Libra.
Oh, okay.
Tishrei is the month of the holidays, of the high holidays. So everything that is in the month of Virgo, which is the month of Elul, is the preparation for the holidays, and humility and getting back to your body.
Yeah.
And so calling your soul back, starting to say sorry in preparation for Yom Kippur, starting the repentance, starting the looking inside, and calling your energy back into your body before the next month. And so it's the month of humility and preparation, you know, it's the month of like taking stock and starting to clean the temple for the holy month, which is next month. And so it's really interesting when we look at it from you know, the 12 signs put in a row, with Aries starting, Aries and spring equinox, which is really the true beginning of the new year, of the Jewish New Year and the astrological New Year, and being at Rosh Hashanah, which is actually the half year. We call it Jewish New Year, but it's not the new year, it's the half year. And so this kind of like facing off moment of halftime, but Virgo being right before.
Yeah.
So like the summary of the last months, like, okay, we're finishing the half. There's like truly a sense of like beginning and end that happens. It's the end of summer, the beginning of the new school year. Like, and all of this is very aligned with Virgo philosophy, that moment of it's about something else is about to come, the
Yeah.
mutability.
And it's also that time of the harvest, right? It's that harvesting and
Yes.
preparing for the winter. So it's a very important time to be taking responsibility for your food and your provisions and for cleaning. If you are canning something or you're jarring something or you're preserving something and you do it wrong, it's not sterile, it's not clean. You're not going to have very good preserves for the winter, and you might not survive it if that was your only food source. It's very important, right, to make sure that everything is properly cleaned
100% and processed.
and processed.
Processed, right? To take what you learned, what you got. And so even spiritually, if it's taking stock, or like literally your stock and
Yeah.
processing it, you know, like we're preparing.
Word process, because it's kind of like Virgo rules the digestive system, right? It rules
Right.
the digestion of things. So like because you are digesting your inner self in order to refine it and purify it. So
For relationship.
our relationship for the
For
next
relationship. And so the next half from Libra on, we're entering the we signs. We're
yes.
entering the relational part of it. So now it's like, how can I really make myself ready to be in relationship? And so for the Jews, maybe the ultimate relationship, like the ultimate other that's happening in Libra, is God.
Yeah, yeah. Or well, also, well, for sure. But in that kind of time of year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it almost reminds me of the feather, right? To weigh the feather as you die. What's the story from the Egyptian mythology where I think it's, I can't remember the name of the god, but every soul that dies, their soul is weighed, and if it weighs more than a feather, they're like they don't pass through to the, they're not redeemed, right? Like they come back on the wheel of karma. It's like that quality of weighing and calculating according to the law. And for the Jews, it would have been the law of the Torah, or it would have been the law of God. And in Libra, it does rule law, but it rules, I mean, Virgo also rules law, but just a different kind of law. Virgo's
Law of nature.
law, it's more transcendent, it's more of an alignment to come into a state of
Oh
purity,
yeah.
to come into a state where you are actually soul realized. You're in humility, which means your ego has been culled to the point where you're willing to just be what you are, no more, no less. And so you're in a pure state of receptivity and service. But in Libra, then you actually have to calculate according to something. There's this relational something. What's the law? What's the law? What are you calculating? What's the balance to be struck? And I guess, according to the 10 Commandments, what have I done wrong?
It's
What have I
so
done
interesting.
sort of law? But it's
There's also the idea of contracts in Libra, right? And it feels a little bit like this, like the Jewish holidays. It feels like a bargaining moment. I
it's a
think like
bargaining move.
I think it's like, listen, God.
Listen, God,
I
I really
tried
feel bad at
to
this, but I was pretty good at this. Please, please, please
please,
forgive me.
please, please. It feels like bargaining, feels very Libra. Feels
Isn't that
like
what
bargaining.
relationships are? We're always
Which
bargaining.
should, period. That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And so arguably, and I don't know if we're seeing this right now because we are in Virgo, but it's not true, not always, but recently have had so much reverence for this sign and what it represents of make me useful. How can I take this ego bullshit? Actually, all of this bullshit, my family, my voice, my secure, all of my sense of self bullshit, how can I make this useful?
Yeah.
How can I be used? Use me.
Mhm.
This is so beautiful, where it's very difficult for people who have the sun in Virgo is because the sun wants to be self. And Virgo says there is no self. And
Oh,
so that ego pull can be like really difficult for some Virgo
true.
because
Oh,
they want to be a self, but they know profoundly that there's no such thing. So there is like that push pull. It's, you know,
yeah, I wonder if it's harder for a Virgo sun or, yeah,
or rising maybe.
well, I was thinking more like a moon, like to be the Virgo moon would be a little bit more of a painful sort of experience, I would imagine, even though, you know, Virgo esoterically, I think is ruled by the moon. So it's a very comfortable place perhaps for the moon at a spiritual level, but not at a personality level. But I wonder what
Mhm.
it's like to be a Virgo sun. I mean, I would imagine that your radiance would constantly be trying to fix things or be helpful or be in service in some way, but also that there would be constantly this reminder of how you're doing it sort of wrong, or how nothing is ever good enough, right? That there would be a feeling of, yeah, I want to be helpful.
It's that disappointment in the humans that you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's like that disappointment of also of what's possible. I think the sense of disappointment is always latent there.
I think that part of the paradox of Virgo as a sun archetype would be to learn how to dance with that paradox of like perfectly imperfect, right?
Mhm.
To be a Virgo sun in a healthy way, you would have to be very comfortable with the fact that you are perfectly imperfect, and that that is literally just as good as it will ever be, right? That
Yeah,
there's nothing else to be than that.
exactly,
How well
exactly.
you dance with that paradox is going to really determine sort of the quality of your life. And that reminds me of the feeling of Virgo, that always strikes me for my own experience of Virgo. So I don't have any Virgo in my chart, but I have my North Node and my Neptune in the house of Virgo. So I draw into that place in my psyche all the time. It's kind of my ultimate focus, my ultimate goal in life, right? And it feels like that part of my chart is always trying to bring me into just simple presence, like just to be present in the body, just to be in the moment. It's sort of like that spiritual woo woo flying around, just wants to land in the now and be in the present moment and be with what is, and that's it. And that's enough. In fact, that's everything, right? To be in the moment. Isn't that in the, you know, didn't we go through this in the 60s? Wasn't there this whole movement of just be here now? And like this LSD moment, like where we went all out and explored the universe, and then all of like we come back from these great highs and these ayahuasca trips and these amazing revelations, and then we're still right here right now. And like you
And
still
there's
have to
still
walk.
dishes, and there's still you still have to walk your dog. There's still dishes in the kitchen. There are kids to be fed. There are groceries and dirty laundry, right? But you know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, same. You
But
know,
you just
carry wood,
know after enlightenment, you
carry
just know
water.
that you're God doing those things. So you
Yeah,
make those things sacred. You make those things a sacred honor. It's an honor to do the dishes. It's an honor to walk the dog. It's an honor to take care of your children. You know, even if it sucks, even if you're bored, even if it is a relentless cycle, a repetitious cycle of mundane tasks that seem useless and meaningless, you bring meaning to them through remembering your sacredness and giving
yeah,
respect is due, which is to the material world around you. Like if God was to come into a body, what would God want? God would want to be of service, right? God would want to take care of whatever was there. God would want to make sure that everything around it was good. Just
and you know that the mutability of Virgo, the fact that Virgo is mutable Earth, the processing, the rearranging, the doing something about it, the creative part of it, I think is really important. The active part of it. I'm being used for this act of transformation. And so that's super important to remember the mutable. I take this, I do that to it, and now it is that.
yes, that's part of the processing. I take something
Exactly.
in this form, then I somehow do something to it, and then I fix it, process it, purify it, redeem it,
Make it
whatever it is,
better.
make it better, right? I make it
I
better.
take this dirty carrot, I peel it, I chop it, I put some laurel and some oregano, and you have this most delicious soup that's for your health, right?
Oh,
I I take this garden, I take out the weeds, I put the things, I make it nice, I clean the table. We have it's the idea of being part of nature, of helping nature, even maybe, of being, you know, the processor for nature.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful and really poetic.
Oh.
You know, but that also implies sort of like this humble absence of the self that can make the self suffer when the self wants to.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why Virgo suffers so much. Because like one of the things that every single client you and I have ever had who has Virgo is if you really get them talking, they're going to tell you all about their inner voice that is their inner critic that is so mean and they can't get away from it. And you know what? I don't actually have one of those anymore. Like I worked on myself so much and I went into
Do
my
you
dark.
have a Virgo placement?
Well, just the North Node and the Neptune in the sixth house. But I used to have a relentless inner critic, you know, and I still do a lot of like deep inner, like redemptive kind of psychoanalysis and self-analysis. But I just somehow along the way figured out how to make it not shame-based. I figured out how to turn shame into humility. I figured out how to honor the process rather than reject it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so alchemically, I managed to flip the switch, but it took me decades to flip the switch, right? To be able to come into the body in a way that wasn't self-annihilating or masochistic. Because I feel like there is this way as we descend into that purification that, you know, like the shit is gross. You know what I mean? Like we don't like we reject the feces, like it smells bad. Like you don't want, like you think about it as being, it's that DK judgment. You know, you're awful, you're bad humans, bad, you're dirty, you're gross, you're mean, you're awful, you never do well enough, you're not good enough. Like there's that relentless judgment that can come in with the archetype, but I don't think that it has to. I think there's a way to get beyond that. I really do. I feel like that is like part of the descent, but it's a trap. I think you spoke to that earlier, that there's a trap that can happen on our way down. And if where we're going in Virgo is to the bottom, and that's absolutely where we need to be going, we need to be going to humility. Is there a way to manage the descent, your own personal descent? Can you manage it with more gracefulness? Can you do it with kindness? Can you honor what's happening and give yourself permission to be annihilated without it needing to be this persecutory horror of your own inner violation of self? Do you know what I mean? Like, can we rewire the narrative on it a little bit so that the self thinks about it differently or experiences it differently? And this is something that I wonder this. This is my curiosity when I speak to a Virgo is, can they get to that alchemical place where they switch from the self-annihilation and the self-deprecation and the self-hate to this honoring of what's actually happening at an energetic level, and to see themselves as this sacred process and this and give themselves to that process with honor,
It's
respect.
complicated. It's complicated because for a sign that strives for purity and perfection, to go back down and be so close to impurity and imperfection, it's a big complicated mind fuck. I think all of the sign have their mind fuck to deal with, right? And that's the mind fuck that Virgo deals with, is
Yeah.
this ideal, exactly like the goddess DK, right? Her name is DK.
DK or Astrea. Astrea is another.
Australia. So, you know, like this idea of morality, of perfection, of purity, and the rage at the immorality, the imperfection, the impurity that is everywhere and within us, right? And so the only way being down is a slippery slope to not like really, you know, fall flat on your face in this thing, in this thing of
So
like,
this is maybe where the mercurial part comes in, right? Like, so where Mercury plays its role somehow in the archetype, because what is your mind doing?
mhm.
How is your mind reacting to this? What is the narrative, or what is the mental orientation to this process? Can you catch yourself and see what it is your mental process is actually responsible for? So like if Virgo is responsible for laying out all the beans, the dried beans, and then picking out the ones that are rotten, or picking out the stones, do you know what I mean? Or laying out the rice and picking out the stones. Like
That's exactly it. That's Virgo.
That's Virgo.
Period.
Period.
That's the
So
action of
it
Virgo.
doesn't mean that there's something wrong because the stones are there. It doesn't mean the stones are
Exactly.
bad. Like it just means that there's some stones and your job is to pull them out, and so the rice can be really fluffy and clean so that no one will bite the stone. You know what I right? Like so maybe it's just an understanding of the mental process that Virgo goes through of like sifting through, analyzing, reorienting, segmenting, ordering, and reducing. And if you can remove your ego, because all that the ego is just a reaction. It's a trying to control the process and own it. Well, if this is what my process is, well, surely it means something wrong about me because I'm picking every little stone out. So I must be the stone because
it's trying to make the process about the self. It's trying to make the process about the self. The ego tries to make everything about the self. There's this gorgeous quote that I heard last time. It said, humility is not thinking less about yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. Period. You don't need to say you're shit. Just stop thinking about what you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a shit.
This has nothing to do with you.
Nothing is about us, you know?
That's it. Yeah.
And so so that's what's complicated, because the ego wants to make the whole story about us. And I think with the other signs, like in Aries, the ego is fine.
Oh yeah.
It's about me. It's me. In Leo, it's fine. Even in Taurus, it's like it's mine. Fine. Right? In Gemini, it's like hear me out. I'm talking, hear me out.
Let me tell you
the
this.
ego
Let me go.
fine.
But not in Virgo.
But not in Virgo. Not in Virgo. Or even in Libra, it's like, oh, what am I? Who are you? Who am I to you? You know, maybe starting Virgo, it starts to have questions. But before Virgo, the ego is fine.
Yes, the ego is definitely a part of the equation before Virgo in a way that Virgo refuses to accept. Like there is something that happens in Virgo where the ego has to die. It reminds me of the Eleusinian Mysteries, which were part of the Demeter Persephone myth in the Greek culture. They had these mysteries, these initiatory mysteries where they would bring people in the culture to these this initiatory experience. I believe it happened twice a year, probably in the Pisces season and in the Virgo season, at opposite ends. But the major mysteries happened in the harvest season during Virgo season, and they would perform the story of Demeter and Persephone and the descent and all of this. And then they would take a hallucinogenic drink. Well, it's a little contentious academically whether it was or not, but they found traces of argot, which is like a mold that grows on wheat and which was used to in LSD. It was actually the thing that created LSD. So what most people who are not, stuffy and academic are, assume about the Eleusinian Mysteries is that they were going on a psychotropic journey, and what in my research, what I've seen is that the way people who went through the mysteries would speak about them after, a common result or a common outcome that they would speak of is that they were no longer afraid of death. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever done any plant medicine or LSD or anything. I have. Of course. But what it does is it takes your little ego, destroys it, right? It shows you that you're part
of the above.
Like it's like, okay, guess what? You are actually not anything, and you're part of this enormous cosmic consciousness. And why would you ever be afraid of death after you realize that? It's impossible. So there was this initiatory thing that the Greeks went into where they would descend into this quote unquote underworld, which is essentially just,
tripping balls. Yeah.
Tripping balls. And then they would come back up and this would be like a rite of passage that was considered to be like kind of like a real, really important part of their whole life. Like to get called to the mysteries was a really big honor, and it was a big deal, right? And it was something to revere. And so inside those mysteries is that egoic death, and inside Virgo is that initiation into an egoic death.
That's what we're going to call this episode. We're going to call it Virgo, the Death of Ego.
Virgo, the death of ego.
It's period. It's on period. I think this is what our conclusion is together. It's interesting because we really didn't have an agenda on how this was going to go, but all roads led to really, like, this is really what it's about. And that's why it might be, you know, complicated.
I would then lay on one more thing though. Okay.
100%. I wasn't wrapping up. I wasn't finishing. I was just saying, okay, like we're getting there. We have something. I wrote it down with my pink pen. The death of ego. This is where we're at right now in our little brainstorm. Yeah.
Absolutely. The death of ego, the reduction of self to the bottom of what one is. And at the bottom of what we are is we are a pure pulse of creation, right? At the bottom of you, when you go to the very bottom of you, if you go to the very root of you and you just feel your essence, you are what you are, no more, no less. Yeah.
I was listening this morning to this. You remember this song by Soul to Soul, Back to Life? You know the song? Back to life, back to reality.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was listening to it, and I listened to the lyrics for the first time ever. I had no idea what this song said. I've been singing along without realizing what it was saying. It says, however do you need me? However do you want me? However do you want me? However do you need me? Okay, so back to life, back to reality, back to the here and now is really like a Virgo anthem. I was listening to it this morning, reading the lyrics, and I was like, oh my God, this is everything that has been on my mind. Because in the song, it feels to me like it's saying to God, like, however do you need me? However do you want me? And I had never realized. I thought it was a love song. I thought we were saying this to our boyfriends, of course, because it was the 90s and it was R&B. So you're not telling God, however do you want me? You're telling the boy. So that's where I was at in my head until today, when I realized that really it's like it's a song about being of service to God.
Yes, that's right.
It's like a gospel song, really, in a way.
That's a gospel song, wasn't it?
About like being of service to spirit. And I was like, oh my God, this is so Virgo right now.
Beautiful.
Back to the here and now, back to reality, back to life, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah,
back to the present time. Tell me now, take the initiative. I'll leave it in your hands until you're ready. However do you want me? However do you need me?
It's like so gorgeous. I'm like, and Virgo anthem. So
that's so beautiful, Sarah. Thanks for bringing that in. I really appreciate that. That's so cool.
I'm so happy I found this song after a million years of listening to it.
Yeah, totally.
Thinking I was singing to a boy. However do you need me?
I love it, like when we discover old music like in a totally new way, and you listen to it from your new perspective, and you realize like that's the magic of music in a sense, right? That's the magic, is that it speaks to our soul wherever our soul might be. At whatever stage of consciousness we might be at, it's going to speak its message to us, and we will hear it through our own ears at that moment perfectly for us. But we grow.
And this band is called Soul to Soul on top of it. So okay. Yeah.
Totally.
So you wanted to talk about the esoteric
yes, that is I want to bring it there because I have like these two quotes. First of all, I have an Alice Bailey quote that I wanted to read about Virgo. Okay. And then I have a quote from an esoteric astrologer as well. But I wanted to speak about that quickly because esoteric astrology is about the process we go through on our spiritual path from ego to initiate. Okay, so, or right, so we're all some, as my teacher Alan used to say, we are all somewhere on the conveyor belt of consciousness going back to God, essentially. We're like, and it doesn't, like, no place on that conveyor belt is better or worse than any other place. That there is a process of evolution, there's a process of ascension. And so esoteric astrology tries to point to that kernel of how do we spiritualize within this experience of being a human being, right? It's for those of us who are perhaps a little bit more mystically oriented. This would be the type of astrology that might be enticing to us, or that might be, you know, if I find, I think you would find it very, right? You know, it holds many secrets of alchemy for me when I study esoteric astrology. It's why I really appreciate it. And within esoteric astrology, what they say about Virgo is that it is the birth of the cosmic Christ within us. Okay, the birth of the cosmic Christ within us. And the word Christ as being not a Christian denominational term, but as being indicative of the sacred one. So Krishna would be a Christ, right? Buddha would be a Christ. Jesus would be a Christ, initiating us into that consciousness, which we consider to be Christ consciousness, or to the sacredness within us. So if Christ represents that part of each one of us that is the spiritual part, right? That is that sort of pure archetypal unity consciousness, right? So if we are in a dualistic structure here on earth, we're in a personality pattern, we're experiencing separation, we incarnate into separation, we know ourselves as separate. On that path toward initiation and service, spiritual service, we go through this process of redeeming our separation, okay? And then entering into unity with our higher self, our soul, and then eventually with our cosmic self. And so in that process, Virgo plays its job as being the part of us that initiates us into the understanding that within each one of us, the sacred seed lies. It doesn't birth itself yet, but it is within us, that there is this awareness of the sacredness within, and that sacredness is worthy of protection. It's worthy of respect. It's worthy of honor, and it's worthy of tending. It's why they say that Virgo is the mother of the Christ. She holds the Christ within her womb. Right? She holds and she treats herself as though she were preparing a vehicle, a preparatory vehicle to hold the Christ within. So when we think about, you know, the descent and the masochism that can come with that, you know, is that how you would treat yourself if you knew that you were getting ready to hold the sacred within you, to birth the sacred within you? Or would you honor yourself? Would you treat yourself with great reverence and respect? Would it become a ritual, in fact? Would you ritualize self-care? Would you ritualize your mundane tasks? Would you ritualize your healing and the perfection of your form, right? Would that become in itself a sacred act in preparation for what is coming in the upper archetypes, which is like sort of coming into universal consciousness? In a conscious way, you know?
The idea of the preparation is there, the idea of like getting ready for meeting our soulmate. And so it's also, that's the point that's interesting, is like,
soulmate.
Right? There's
not,
like
not on a physical level, but on a
on exactly.
Exactly. And that is the esoteric meaning of Libra, by the way.
Exactly, right?
And we hold the balance between the soul and the personality. But in Virgo, we are purifying the personality so that we can do that process of unification that comes in the upper planets or in the upper archetypes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, I feel like it's like such a beautiful moment to do that for ourselves, you know, to channel. So not everybody's a Virgo, Not everybody has Virgo placements. I don't. I have Virgo intercepted, empty.
Wow.
Virgo and Pisces both intercepted and empty. You know, nothing there, nothing going on, nothing to understand. I'm very surrounded with Virgos in my life. I have like the 4 closest women to me are Virgos.
Really?
My grandmother is a Virgo. I have Virgo cousins. There's Virgos around me, and so it's my interception. So I've always felt like they're like peculiar and interesting to study, and definitely very different from me.
Huh.
And in also in helping my Virgo friends become, you know, or tap into the sacredness of their own Virgo, it's helped me do the same. So
Oh,
right now I'm really, really into trying to ritualize and make sacred the things that feel unholy to me,
oh,
the
really?
things that feel difficult. Like, for instance, I've always felt like taxes and stuff like that were really difficult. I also, for long, have looked down upon, house tasks.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't like cleaning up. I'm like an intellectual. I'm
yeah.
meant for big thinking. So like there is like, also I find that super complicated, like within me,
Yeah.
that thing of like that humility, like, yeah, you're an intellectual, go make your bed,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so that's like really something that I'm trying to, or that I'm noticing, I'm appreciating. It helps me. It helps me to light a candle. So last time I created a candle for my taxes. Like, I'm gonna do my taxes. I mean, I'm doing my taxes in August. Remember how it's due
Haven't
like
even
1st of
started mine
April?
yet. I haven't even started mine yet. I'm so embarrassed.
Girl,
I'm having a moment. I'm gonna be honest. I'm in the same position this year. I didn't have time.
like if I have Revenue Canada, like call me one more time, girl. I'm going to
Oh my God. Well, I
freak
keep
out.
sending the money. I just keep like sending the money, like just tons and tons. Like, oh, here's another $30,000. Just take that. Then you just leave me
Big
alone.
bad, leave me alone. But no, they come back and they want more. So I made like a little candle. I actually, look, it's here.
Maybe I need to do my
Um,
taxes this Virgo season. You're inspiring me.
so I take these little tiny candles,
Is that
ski
what?
light candles, and I take out the candle. I put
Uh-huh.
like lavender, rice, rosemary, whatever. I put back the candle and then I burn it. It smells good.
Oh my goodness.
And I make a prayer on it and I infuse my like seeds with like intention and stuff. And I'll tell God, like, I'm going to do my taxes. I don't want to do my taxes. Please help me. It's going to be terrible. And I light my candles, and then it's not so terrible. And then I do it. I'm like, "Oh, that wasn't so bad."
I know you always
Um,
feel better. It's true. You always feel
you
so.
feel better after. And there's like a shit ton of things that I need to get to take care of. I have 4 kids, fucking September starting in 2
Oh, I
days. So
know.
there's like a million things going on. And I really want to be present and intentional in the doing the things that I feel are
Are
mundane,
yeah.
mundane. And for people who work with the sacred, with the sacred, with the sacred all the time, like putting the mundane back to center as like, yeah, actually we're here. So,
It's
yeah,
true.
you can be on the mountain, you can meditate for 15 hours, you're here. Are you nice to the lady in the store? Are you
Mhm.
cleaning up your part of the world?
Yep.
Are you cutting your kids' nails? Like, there are little things that need to be done while we're here, you know?
Yes, you're so right,
And
Sarah.
my aunt had sent me this thing from YouTube that was like that was like a joke between us, but that was very profound, I thought. And it was like a YouTube video that said the Japanese people's secret for success. 12 CEOs in Japan use this manifestation secret, and it is that they clean their toilet every day. So we were laughing, thinking about like the CEO of Toyota has declared he is a millionaire because he cleans his toilets every
Toilet
day.
every day.
So we were like, oh, wow, how beautiful. You want to know the secret? And so probably somebody was like, what's the secret to your success, mister? And he said, I clean my shit every day.
Clean
And
my
people,
shit.
I clean my shit.
I,
What's the secret to your success? I
I
clean my
say,
shit.
here's a perfect Virgo quote, okay? Given to me by a Virgo moon friend years ago. An empty vessel has capacity.
That's a word. I'm writing it.
That's it. Think about it. You clean your shit and anything can happen, right? If you're empty, you have capacity. If you're full of shit, well, good luck.
You know? So I mean, can cleaning our toilets be like the real fucking spiritual application of a lot of
Representation of humility. Like it takes a lot of, and it's your shit. It's cleaning your shit. It's cleaning the ego, right? It's coming down to the bottom. It's saying, I am no better or worse than anyone else. And I am
I
exactly
shit too,
I shit.
and here's my toilet. I'm cleaning it.
I'm clean. Yeah.
And so yeah, so this feels like very, right on to kind of like tap into these ways of humbling ourselves, but also like channeling God
Yes.
outside of the mountain, outside of Mount Olympus, outside of, the ashram.
Yeah, and the two parts of Virgo being the descent within, where we go in to clean the shit, and then the ascent out, where we come out to be useful. Right? That there is a cycle in Virgo. There is a descent and an ascent. So there is an internal part where we're cleaning the toilet and we are finding the Christ within, and we're creating this sacred space inside our beautiful womb of creation in here. And when we've done our work, there is a natural part of us that wants to come up and wants to be present in the moment and in service to what is around us. And the more clean we are inside, the more pure we are inside, the more humble we are when we stand up and come out, then we're more available, right? We're more honest, we're more real, and we're more willing and able to meet the need of the moment with a big open heart rather than I'm bitter, I'm a martyr, like whatever, or I'm mean. Virgos can be really mean. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, actually, I haven't seen a lot of mean Virgos. I'll take that back. It's not a meanness.
It's defensive.
Bitterness, I think, maybe just a bit more bitter. Like,
Maybe like by defensiveness, how when some people feel attacked, they attack themselves. But
yeah,
yeah, it has a lot of different ways to express itself, but it's really, yeah, it's a sign that's not always understood, because it's very, very deep.
very deep. It holds many sacred mysteries. And saying that Virgo is analytical and is fussy and is self-critical and is, wants perfectionist, like perfection. Like when we talk about Virgo in these kind of very rudimentary ways, we almost create a triviality about it rather than acknowledging like the deeply sacred and valuable contribution that this archetype plays in all of our lives, and how fundamental this archetype is in our reality, and how it's so important for each of us to go through this initiation. Each one, even if we don't have Virgo planets or we're not a Virgo, it's still so critical for us during this season. I love how the Jews created their months in correlation with the archetypal seasons. I mean, that just makes me so happy being half Jewish, not full Jewish. So I'm not as initiated into it as you are, but I can't tell you
I'm
how.
have to,
Oh, there you go. Well, that's great, because I can still love Christ and I can still love Judaism. I get the best of both worlds. But it's just like the fact that they were able to honor the month in alignment with the actual archetypal impulse is is just such a testament, isn't it? To the
It's
fact
there's
that
no
cosmos is on.
vacuum. There's no vacuum in yeah, these archetypes exist
They're real.
everywhere in every culture, wherever you look. Wherever you look, it's
I
the
bet if
same.
you were to look and you were to correlate them, we would find them. We would find them in the holidays. We would find them in the rituals. We would find them within the mythologies. It's
Yeah.
true. They're
Yeah.
a constellation or a fabric that we exist within. And it's like, it's part
The
of like,
holidays are always on the new moon and the full moon. It's all lunar, you know? So there's like really these portals that are very tapped into, like cosmic portals of alignment. What I love about it is that it's giving you a way to tap into that energy.
Mhm.
So, you know, like different ways to tap into energy. Not everybody sees it this way, but it's definitely there if you care to find it, you know. Um,
It's true.
yeah. So
Right, I'm
I mean,
feeling we should probably start to wrap up our
that's
conversation.
what I'm thinking also. We're maybe gonna speak about dates, but I don't know that it's important right now. I feel
I think like if people, I think this conversation is going to stand the test of time in the sense that it's not relegated to what's happening right now, but just in speaking of what's happening right now, I mean, we are in a Mercury retrograde in Virgo right now, right? So doesn't that just say descent into purification, right? Right, to have
yeah, discernment, mad observer time, like really allowing ourselves to like take a look within, take a look at our surroundings and discern what's what. Really, Mercury retrograde is an opportunity to see things from a new perspective. And it always gives us the opportunity to see something that, oh, maybe we didn't look at it this way. And so with Virgo, that's really powerful. Um, you know, the idea of like, yeah, discernment, perspective, the way we look at things, how we process things,
Mhm.
what we make of it. And also non-attachment during Mercury retrograde, which is super important for Virgos and everybody. Like just this idea of like, do your best and let whatever happen, you know?
Perfectly imperfect.
Yeah. So that's it. We covered it. Yeah. Most of it. We
So
did it. Two,
good.
1.5 hours.
Yay, our first podcast official. Well,
Yeah.
we'll get better, but I think this is going to be our new offering.
Yeah. Getting together and ranting about whatever astrology topic we want to rant and go really deep into. I think that's the gist.
Good.
Amazing.
Keep
Thank
that.
you to anyone who's listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, and you will links for both of our websites, our newsletters. If anyone wants to work with one of us as well, we're out here. We do one-on-one consultations. Both of us are astrologers. We lead classes, all that stuff. If anyone is
We
interested,
tutor, we help astrologers, we do
we're,
a bunch of
we're
stuff.
here. Basically, that's what we want to say. We're
Yeah.
available if you are interested in engaging, and if not, that's absolutely fine because that is not why we're doing this podcast. We are just putting this out as the gift of gab that we share. That we can come.
Yes, definitely. 100%.
All right,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.